So my name is Travis Spencer. I'm the CEO and founder of Twobo Technologies, one of the companies that founded Nordic APIs. Really glad to have you all here. And in this talk, what I want to do is discuss sort of the patterns that we've been seeing as people are launching APIs and preparing for APIs. We've heard a little bit about this already from a couple of talks, and we're going to give our spin on it. We don't really have a dog in the fight here, so it's kind of a more abstract presentation than some of the other ones, but all of the same sort of components that have been discussed or presented in those, you can kind of see that. So draw those connections, see those things as I'm presenting and talking about that. But the agenda or the sort of sequence of my talk will be to discuss the security challenges in context. I think it's always important before we zoom down into something that we discuss the big picture. So we'll touch on that, and then we'll discuss what we call the Neosecurity stack as we build up new services that are all using RESTful APIs. We have to use new technologies. As we were doing service-oriented architecture and component-based architectures in prior years, we had different technologies to provide that security. But now as APIs are increasingly or predominantly RESTful, we have to use some different technologies to actually allow these systems, these APIs, to be secured. So we'll talk about what that stack is, and then how that stack is almost like a base or a foundation on which we can build these platforms to run our APIs, and talk about what those pillars are. And finally, once we kind of have that base, we can look at some examples of some innovative things that we can do with that. And there are many, and I'll only have time for just one or two. So now just kind of looking at the big picture, the API security needs to always be thought of together with enterprise security and with mobile security. You need to make sure your servers are secure, you need to make sure your network is secure, your perimeter is secure, and we have well-established procedures, technologies, know-how for doing those sort of things. That's always advancing and increasing those, so we have to keep in mind that state of the art and push the envelope there. At the same time, mobile security, the endpoint is secured, that the phones and the tablets are secured and enrolled in MDM or MAM or even mobility management in general, and then put that together with API security, and then you have a complete sort of security for the entire situation that we're building up here. And in all of this, the center of this, both the intersection between enterprise security, between mobile security and API security, is identity. Who someone is the very first question that we have to answer before we can ever figure out what they're allowed to do. So knowing this is critical in providing solutions for secure access to data and data that's exposed through APIs or otherwise. So knowing who somebody is, as I was saying, in this new, more RESTful world, how do we do this? Well, there's actually a collection of technologies that we use and we put together to do this, almost like in days gone by we had the WS star stack, as it was often called. We had various protocols and technologies that were put together to provide complete security. Now we do this in the same sort of fashion, but with different technologies, different specifications. And so for federation, what we have is something like SAML and OpenID Connect. And by federation, what I'm talking about is once we've authenticated and identified you, verified who you are in one context, one domain, how do we take the answer of that question to another domain without asking the user, that person, that entity again, how and who are you? So technologies like SAML and OpenID Connect provide that ability to reuse the answer of that question of who you are. So with provisioning, we have a technology called SCIM. And provisioning, I mean the ability to create, add, update, delete users. The ability to put them into a group in an automated way, to be able to assign them to new groups and embed groups within groups. All this sort of provisioning needs to take place in these more RESTful systems that we're building. And this is provided by a technology called SCIM, which stands for System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. And then identity is everything that we're talking about here, where who are you? We need to have some digital representation of the answer to that question. So who are you? What representation can we give you? This is done using technologies provided in the JSON Identity Suite. And if it helps, what I'm talking about is almost like if you go to Trafikverket or DVLA in UK or DMV in the United States, they actually go through the trouble of figuring out who you are, testing that you can drive, giving you a driver's license, and on that driver's license you have some information about who you are. You have a picture, you have your name, you have a signature perhaps, these sort of claims or attributes about you. This is your sort of identity. And in the same way, digitally, that collection of information, that name-value pair, signature as it is, or first name, Travis, those sorts of name-value pairs, we need to represent those digitally, and we do that in a RESTful API using JSON, and as defined in this JSON Identity Suite. And then we need delegated access. We need to be able to allow third-party applications, third-party systems to do things on our behalf. And this is something that's incredibly necessary as we are having all these open APIs and these applications produced by third parties doing things with our data. We need to authorize that access and have a way of revoking that access or limiting that access after a certain time. And this delegated access is done using a protocol called OAuth. And then finally, what we need is authorization. At the end of the day, that's really, in my opinion, the most important question. Knowing who you are is just so that I can answer the more interesting question of what are you allowed to do. So the authorization comes from a technology called XACML, which is a standards-based authorization protocol. So this Neosecurity stack, I want to touch now on some of these technologies. I won't dive into all of them. If you have questions on any of them that I don't touch on, grab me during a break. But SAML, as I mentioned, is a federation protocol. It's tried and true. It's been around for a very long time. It's been deployed tens of thousands of times, running in production. And this allows you to take that answer to that question of who are you, and reuse it in some other security domain. It might be a partner's domain, it might be a subsidiary, it might be another business unit, it might be a cloud service. And so this sort of single sign-on reduces the number of passwords that your users are having to manage, which makes their lives easier, which increases adoption, which increases security because you're not giving out credentials that end up not being revoked. So a lot of benefits to single sign-on. SAML is very, very complete in what it provides. It provides all sorts of ways of doing this federation, and it's being continually developed. Even right now, version 2.1 is being worked on. So this is a protocol that isn't just for yesteryear. This is ongoing, being deployed today while we're sitting here, being updated in its specification even now. So this is very relevant technology, but also coming down the pike is something called OpenID Connect, which is another federation protocol that actually builds on top of OAuth, which I'll talk about in a moment. And this adds identity information into OAuth. So you can have one protocol as kind of your basis and then build on top of that for single sign-on, for federation, which makes those two use cases, those two needs align technologically, which could be quite helpful as you roll this out, as you build this out, as you deploy this. And you may have heard of OpenID before. It's comes out of the social networking world. It's often associated with less secure access to less valuable data. And while that was true perhaps with the older versions of the protocol, OpenID Connect now has been profiled and defined in a way that you can do very high security situations with that. And so it's really only connected with prior versions in name. The actual protocols are not backward compatible whatsoever. So if you have that sort of connotation of OpenID Connect, OpenID, that's insecure, that's not really the case anymore. OpenID Connect was defined with mobile in mind. This is a really new protocol, so its messages, all of the transactions, the exchanges are designed to support low bandwidth situations, mobile where we have constrained compute power. So this is really some of the reasons why I think in time it will become more used than SAML, even though they're both being used for federation, because as the world does become more mobile and more connected, and we have things like we talked about yesterday with the Internet of Things, where we have these low power devices and very constrained bandwidth situations, OpenID Connect will be a more useful or more targeted technology. The OpenID protocol defines a way of actually getting additional user information. So all of that sort of information that you would need after authentication, you can pull that out of those systems. And so it's very useful beyond even just federation. So I mentioned SCIM, which is, as I called it, simple system for cross-domain identity management. It used to go under the name Simple Clouded Identity Management, and is now being worked on in the IETF, where the name was changed. And this is a protocol for doing CRUD, if you will, create, read, update, and delete of users and groups. It supports bulk ingest of identities. So as you get started with a system and you need to have an automated way of pulling that data into your system, you can send a bulk update. It's been profiled to work with SAML and soon, I think, OpenID Connect, so you can do just-in-time provisioning during an SSO message, a single sign-on message. OAuth 2, there's lots of talk in the API space about this technology. This version 2 is rather new. The interesting part, I think, about OAuth 2 is that it can be composed in all sorts of ways. We already talked about how OpenID Connect is an extension or a profile of OAuth. And even in some talks yesterday, we heard that how OAuth 2 is being extended and used beyond its original intention to do interesting and new use cases, and those will only increase. So OAuth 2 is really forming the basis of the security infrastructure around delegated access for APIs. It's doing this a lot because it provides not only it not only meets our old requirements, but some of our new requirements in a four-party trust situation where we have like a back-end API, a front-end website, and a third-party mobile application. Needing to know at that back end all those different entities, all those different identities is important. And with OAuth, it makes it very easy to implement that. I talked about the JSON Identity Protocol Suite. This is a collection of protocols that allow us to define all sorts of things around encryption and signing and algorithms, and we can use these to make tokens, representations of who people are in digital form that are able to be passed in HTTP headers and query strings. And if it helps, if you're familiar with SAML, think of it as a lightweight SAML token. So now that we have this sort of technology base to secure our APIs, what we want to do is build a platform on top of this using those technologies. So we have this suite of protocols that give us these federation capabilities, provisioning capabilities, authentication capabilities. You put three pillars on top of this to establish a platform. And in this, we have identity management system for figuring out who people are. We have API management system for managing those APIs, and then entitlement management for figuring out what those people are allowed to do with the data exposed by those APIs. So these form your Neosecurity platform. Let's dive into now what is in each of those different subsystems. In the identity management system, we have a security token service. This is really the heart of the system. In my opinion, if you can't identify specifically where the security token service is within your system, you have or will have problems. A security token service is a technology that should be elevated to the place of DHCP or DNS within your organization. Issuing security tokens and digital representations of who people are is so important that it needs to be have that place within your organization so that you can be confident in knowing digitally when you assert that someone is who they say they are, they really are that person. At least to a level of sufficiency that you're confident in that, exposing that data. Closely related to a security token is a federation server. So a federation server is an entity or a technology that you run to provide that single sign-on, that distribution of that identity to other domains. It's done typically through a browser. So being able to allow that single sign-on from like a portal to a cloud application or a SaaS application is possible using a federation server. And this is a reusable component in the identity management system within your platform. A security token service and a federation server do not actually do the verification of identity. As you may have noticed in that suite of technologies, there was nothing actually related to authentication, identifying who that person is. Oftentimes that's done in a very, it's done in different ways. Some of those are standardized like Kerberos. Others are not necessarily standardized and could be done just with symmetric key verification or something like that. But the authentication service, in whatever way it does and whatever credential it ends up using, it identifies that person. A security token service will issue a token about that person, pass it along using a federation service. But in order to do that verification, 3 minutes, oh man. You need to have some way of storing that identity, and that's done in an identity repository. So the API management system, there is various components. I think the two most important are this API security service and API integration service. So that API security service is the one that's going to actually be enforcing at the perimeter those security policies that are defined in your entitlement management service. So it's going to be closely connected to that entitlement management system, and it's going to integrate with other systems within the organization, perhaps legacy ones or new other services that you're developing. The entitlement management system consists of various components as well. Two of the most important are the policy decision point and the administration point. So you need some way of defining that policy in a central location, enforcing it in your APIs. And what you actually want is to define it centrally and not only use that in your APIs, but use it in your IT systems, use it in your enterprise security systems, on your endpoints. So by using a standards-based technology to do that, you can actually use that not only in API security. Remember, we talked about this broader context. You want to apply those policies in one place so that you can go back and see, okay, this is what someone was allowed to do. This is why they were allowed to do it. So on this with this stack, we can build this platform, and on top of there, we can do all sorts of things, which I don't have much time to go into, but one thing I want to say is building these platforms is rather complex. It's oftentimes quite custom, almost like a baker will go in and buy sugar and wheat and flour to make cakes. Depending on which ingredients you use, you might get a strawberry cake, you might get a chocolate cake. And in my opinion, you're not going to find an API security platform you can just go buy in a box and set up. You really need to put these together, and that's actually what we do at Twobo. Is we take these different ingredients like WebSSO, API security, authorization, social media aggregation, account management, and we bring those together into ready-made solutions, almost like cakes. And actually, I'd like to announce a new supplier of ingredients, if you will, that we've partnered with. We've become an official reseller of NCAP, which provides multi-factor authentication so that our API customers can confidently know who it is that's speaking to their APIs. I don't know that I actually have any time for questions, but thank you for listening. And if there is, I'll take them. I think you have a few minutes. Okay, super.
Thanks. When SOAP came out like 10 years ago, it was really popular, just like REST is now. And it was eventually killed by all the WS Death Star standards. So do you see the same future for REST when all these standards come up now?
If your requirements are sufficiently complex, the solution will be similarly complex. I think that APIs started being very open, exposing low-value data, and so the security needs around that were straightforward and simple. And now, as APIs are kind of skyrocketing off, a lot of the reason for that is enterprise adoption. They have a brand to protect, they have a data to protect, so we need higher levels of security in our APIs, which results in more complicated technologies.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm just wondering if, like, the enthusiasm of the crowd will be
we'll be old,
somehow
we'll be old, crusty restiers someday, and some new crowd of computer science graduates will come along and say this is too hard, and they'll do it all over again. That's the nature of our business.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have for questions. But thank you, Travis.
Yes, thank you all.